Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the afternoon session of Learning Collective. I am Ann Wynn, Marketing Specialist at Risk Inc. I hope you were able to catch our two sessions this morning with Ajay Pangarkar and Anthony Altieri. If you were not able to do so, they remain on our Facebook company page, so you'll be able to access them at any time. This afternoon, I'm excited to have Tammy Rutherford from Rustici Software with us, sharing some insights on how to take your training content beyond your LMS. So an enterprise content delivery plan. And I am going to share with you all who are not familiar with Tammy, who she is. Tammy, as I mentioned, is the Director of Accounts and Marketing at Rustici Software, which helps e-learning companies work well together by compliance with specifications such as SCORM and XAPI. She spent more than 12 years in the e-learning space. And since joining Rustici Software in 2011, Tammy has advised hundreds of e-learning vendors, content publishers, organizations, and government agencies on strategies and software solutions for implementing and taking advantage of e-learning standards in their products and systems. As I mentioned, I'm excited to have her here today, and I'm excited to hear her share her information on to help enterprise content delivery. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Tammy to get started with her session. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Ann, and thanks for that lovely and lengthy introduction. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Rustici Software, simply put, we're the nerds in the e-learning space. So we really focus on helping companies implement the e-learning standards in their content and products. And so we're going to take a lot of the knowledge that we've gained over the years, talking to all of those groups, and share that with you today as we see some common challenges that come up and some tips and solutions that we can provide to you when you're looking at ways to take your training outside of your LMS to reach a larger audience. I am coming to you live from my home office in Nashville, Tennessee, as we all are adjusting and working from home. So hopefully you don't hear or see any evidence of a dog in the background, but who knows, he might make an appearance. So let's jump right in. So what are we talking about today? So we're going to be talking about what I started to call an extended learning network a little while ago, as we realized that we see a lot of different use cases show up where you might have training content that you deliver within your own LMS, but you also have needs to take that outside of your LMS to reach other folks in your learning network. So one of the things we're going to talk about today are thinking about those audiences. Who are you serving? Where does this content need to go? And we're also going to talk about some of the most efficient ways to manage that content. When you start to look at a network, you're going to be looking at additional systems to consider. So we're going to walk through some of those complexities today and provide to you, hopefully, some tips and recommendations on how to do that as seamlessly as possible. So let's start with, when we talk about broader learner audiences, you might hear phrases like extended enterprise. So we're going to look through a couple of different cases that you might bump into today where you want to take your training content outside of your own platform to others. Some of these should be familiar, but other use cases might inspire you to say, oh, we need to do that in our organization, and here's how we can do it. Starting with extended enterprise, for those who aren't familiar with the term, if you really think about it, organizations that might have a vast network of partners and customers in their space that they use to get their business done. So you might have supply chains, distributors, resellers, external customer support teams. Think about this as folks that are not employees or that have access to your internal LMS, but people that you also need to provide information and training to. Similarly, you might have places where you have people coming into your organization to do work for you, like pre-employees. These might be people that are going through the induction process, and you want to start providing training before they're hired, which means they don't have access to your system yet. How do you push that training towards them? Or your contractors, your 1099 folks that live outside of your system, but you still need to manage and get information and training to them. We also see this case arise where you're dealing with multiple LMSs when it comes to associations. So associations that serve content and certifications to their members might be serving members that already have an LMS, whether it's through their own organization or through a sub-association. So that's a common use case where content might be spread out across multiple LMSs. And then finally, training companies is a great example of cases where we have seen a training company who provides not only their content, but the platform to deliver that content. Not everybody can come into their training portal to take that content. So we have seen training companies that are starting to expand their reach to figure out, how can I make my training accessible to other systems, even though ideally it should be served on mine? So hopefully that provides some inspiration for you today. If we want to think of a timely example where you might bump into a case where you need to take your training outside of your LMS, we're all working from home today, and we all have different use cases that are starting to emerge and information that needs to get out rapidly. You might think about COVID procedures and policies that are coming through your organization that need to be distributed not only to your employees, but to your partners and customers. How can you best do that? Respond quickly and make sure that updates to that content are managed easily across that vast network as things are changing so rapidly, and having visibility into who's taking that content. So if we think about something that's right in front of us today, hopefully that gives you some context as we walk through some things to consider when it comes to taking your training outside of your LMS. And we're also going to cover what you want to deliver. So think about the user experience. These things: access, a user-friendly experience, accuracy of content, and reporting. None of these are unique to an extended network use case by any means. I think everybody who builds and delivers content always strives for these key things, among other things, always. Why we bring it up today is, as you increase the complexity of your network and incorporate additional systems, managing to these four tenets becomes a little bit harder. And so that's one of the things we want to cover today, are some watch outs for you, things to consider as you're going down this path, or you might be in the middle of the path already, and tips and recommendations on how to always maintain these four tenets within your extended network. Okay, so when we talk about an extended learning network, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to see a lot of different variables. So you might ignore the labels here for a second. Really, the goal here is to help you see pretty quickly your content might be served across a variety of systems. And with those systems, you don't control your environment anymore. So you want to think about, how does my content interact with learners that I don't have direct control over? I don't know how they log into systems. I don't know what devices they're using. You really want to start thinking about all of these users and how do you best serve your extended learning network audience. So thinking about, where is your content going and what happens after that, and what are some places and ways that you can help control and make sure that that's an optimal user experience for both the learner and your clients and administrators that are helping you get that content out there. Okay, so we're going to focus on three particular areas that we hear frequently from customers and folks across the industry, on places where they really want to get their content out to the largest audience possible, which means interacting with multiple systems. And we're going to look at three of the most common things that come up. First, we're going to talk about access and permissions. We're going to talk about what happens to your content once it's out there. How do you maintain it when it's handled across multiple systems? And then finally, how do you know what's happening out there? So let's jump right in and chat and talk about access and user experience first. So questions that you should be asking yourself and the stakeholders within your organization about what's going to happen. So first and foremost, you want to think about, how are these learners going to get access to your courses? We have a couple of options here. You might, that we'll walk through in just a moment, but you're going to want to think about, how does your content get handled in a third-party system or in another LMS? If that's the case, you need to make sure that that content can actually play in that LMS. Things that are going to come up here are the standards. So this is, again, our wheelhouse, but every LMS supports probably at least one of the learning standards, but you're not going to see the same learning standards supported across all LMSs. So if you do serve customers or have content being delivered through multiple LMSs, you do want to be sure that it's compatible with each system. What that might look like is one customer might have a SCORM 1.2 enabled LMS. So you have to provide a course to them in a SCORM 1.2 file if it's to be consumed through their platform. Another customer might come and say, I have AICC. Great. So now you have a different flavor to add to the mix. Somebody else might come in and say, oh, we have XAPI. So be aware of when we talk about content compatibility, it's really important for you to remember your courses will need to be consumed across platforms that might have different requirements of their own. We do see cases where in the training company example, or places where content providers, or you have a platform that you want learners to come to you. So you might say, hey, actually our content's best served here. So let's have learners come to us instead of us bringing the content to them. In those cases, you're going to want to start thinking about the learner experience and how do they get into your system? How hard is it for them to log in? As we all know, one more login to manage is one more login to forget my password on and have to get reset. So there's always going to be that step. So if you do require learners to come to your platform, definitely consider ways to support a single sign-on or some type of seamless delivery to get that learner into your system. The easier it is for them to get into your system, the more likely they will to actually go to your system and take the content. So you also want to think about what devices do your learners use? What platforms are they going to be accessing your content from? If you've got folks that you're serving that are constantly out in the field, you might have a dispersed sales team, for example, that lives on their iPad. You want to make sure that your content is actually going to be mobile friendly or tablet friendly. So thinking about what is the end user actually going to interact with once they finally access the course. So think about what type of devices might be delivering your course as well. Something else to always consider is language support. So as we talk about an extended learning network, that is also a global network in many cases. So delivering your content or supporting multiple languages, if you can do it, if the use case is there and you can manage that, it's definitely worth considering. So we also want to think about not only how they're going to access your courses, but should they? So this is where we talk about permissions. And when we think about bringing content into an extended learning network, there's a couple of different ways to do it. And one of the most frequently used ways that we see is for people to provide their courses to customers to load into their LMS, like we talked about with the compatibility component. That presents a challenge to think about when it comes to your intellectual property. So when you hand courses off, remember that you're handing everything over. That includes all of your files. So it makes it harder for you to control that access on the back end. So once you hand your files off, you really can't take that back. So think about what you're handing off, and if it's important enough to you, there's ways that we can that we'll talk about shortly that help you protect that IP. So you want to think about who should be able to access this. If you have any sort of commercial component to your extended learning network, maybe you're licensing a subscription to product training for your customers, or you're providing any sort of licensing of your content. You've spent a lot of time working on that license and working out that deal and selling the license. Making sure you're able to implement and enforce that license is important. So that means you need the ability to enable and disable access, so that if at any point in time the relationship between you and your customer, or you and your partner changes, you and the contractor that you've been working with, anytime those things change, you do really need to think about, how do I get that content back, or how do I make sure that they can no longer access that content? So access can be a pretty loaded one here, but we definitely want to help you think through ways to protect that content and protect your investment. All right, so once we've connected learners to the content, now we really need to think about what happens if you need to make updates to that course. So when you're thinking about, again, we're coming back to that extended network of systems, maintaining content can get complicated if you don't have a plan in place. This means that if you have content that frequently changes or updates happen, maybe it's a typo that you just need to fix on the fly, swap out an image, or it could be a big breaking change where there's a new regulation or information that absolutely has to come out. Think about those changes. Every time you change your content, you might have a downstream effect with your other systems that are also handling that content. How do you make sure that they also get access to that update? Who's responsible for maintaining the content? So this is a big one. You've got your instructional designers that are obviously creating and pushing the updates, but to get that content out, you might end up in places where you have folks on your side that are managing that to make sure that their clients or their audiences get the updated files. You also want to be mindful of what happens next. Now, the administrator or customer contact that you work with, they also now have to upload and manage getting that updated version to the learners in their system. So there are definitely a lot of components here, and it can get complicated pretty quickly, especially if you're talking about any sort of larger library or frequent changes. So being thoughtful about how frequent your content changes and all of the people that are impacted by managing those updates is really important. And the most important thing here is you want to make sure that the right version of the course is the one that's being used. So even if you go through all of those administrative steps, you absolutely need to make sure that your learners are accessing the correct information. So it is, I can't stress this enough. This is one of the biggest components that we see out there, complexities when you're talking about managing content across platforms. All right, and the third one that we're going to talk about today is reporting. So visibility, knowing what happened in your courses when they're out in the wild like this. What's happening in the course, how many people are using the courses, what courses are being used most frequently. You really want to be able to have that visibility. And when you deliver courses across third-party systems or across that extended learning network, it becomes a little bit harder. And then you also have the complexity of which system knows what. So if you have customers that require reports, you want to understand that on the front end. If you need to make sure that you have visibility into what's happening to courses, you want to make sure that that information resides with you. So making sure that before everything else, that your content is actually designed to collect the information that you want to see, whether it be pass fails, question level details on how learners answered specific questions. Those are all really important. Then you need to make sure that that information is surfaced and to either you or your client, or in some cases both. You also want to be able to have the visibility, just the high level, who's using what clients are actually using these assets, what contractors are taking the compliance training they were supposed to. So it might be everything from compliance management that you need to worry about to partner performance. Are these distributors using the tools? Are they performing better? You want to have that visibility so that you know the time and effort you're putting into your content is paying off. So let's look at some options. In an extended training network or extended learning network kind of model, you might expect to see 3 different ways people might tackle this challenge. We'll start from top to bottom and go through each, and there are pros and cons to all of them, and at the end, we'll sort of do a side-by-side comparison to help you really get a feel for how these solutions compare to each other, and understanding what's most important to you will help you figure out the right path to go down. The first option is share. So this simply means you're going to build your content and hand it off to your customers, or hand it off to be consumed in the systems within your network. What you'll need for this is an authoring tool or some way to create content that is easily publishable across multiple standards. As we talked about earlier, access and compatibility with systems is critical here. Authoring tools are a great way to build a course once and publish it into a variety of e-learning standards. So first, you need the content, and you need a way to share it with systems. So we'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons here, but as we've already talked about, handing courses off to customers for them to load into their systems is a quick and easy way to get it out of your, get it to them, but it also makes it harder for you later to maintain and manage that content, to make sure that only users that should be accessing it are. You don't have a way of disabling access in this model, and you're pretty blind to what's happening once the course is out there. So that's sort of a watch out that we'll talk about in a little bit. Another option we see frequently is deliver direct. So this is where you provide the content in the platform all together and learners come to you to take your courses and your training. So we see this frequently, particularly with training content that is best served from a system that was designed to deliver it, or in cases where you might have audiences that don't have a system already in place. It might be a smaller business, or the 1099 contractor that we mentioned probably doesn't have an LMS at the ready, as they might be an individual or self-employed person. So in some cases, you might need to provide that delivery mechanism if your learners or clients don't already have a system in place. For that, you'll need an LMS. We work with a lot of them. There's tons of different flavors out there. So there are definitely options from lightweight to more advanced feature sets. Really, the choice is yours to figure out what LMS or learning platform solution might be best for you. And then finally, we have distribute. So this is a case where you're actually going to distribute the courses to your customers for them to consume in their LMSs. What's different here is that you're not giving them the course, you're simply providing access. So let's dive into that, because this is the distributing content is a little bit different than the other models, and it's a newer concept that a lot of people are starting to take advantage of. So when we talk about content distribution, we're really talking about sharing access versus sharing assets. You also might be familiar with the term of cross-domain. So this is a cross-domain solution that allows your content to reside on your servers, and you simply share access via proxy files or links back to your content that your customers or third-party LMSs would load into their systems. So this visual will kind of give you a pretty quick view of what this might look like. It's sort of like a hub and spoke model, where you've got one copy of your content versus many copies of your content, and it allows you to maintain that content in one place and simply, again, allow access to that content versus sharing the assets. And as we talked about earlier, sharing content files is great, except you've shared the assets as well. And so it's a lot harder to maintain and protect that content. So you've probably already picked up on a few benefits here, but I'll kind of dive into a few that we see frequently that align back with some of the goals that you should be shooting for when you talk about your building out or improving an extended training network. So let's talk first about version control. So a single source of truth for your content. As we looked at just a second ago in that diagram, your courses are in one place on servers that you control and maintain, which makes it very easy for you to make sure that your content, the content that your learners are accessing, is always the right version. It's always the most up-to-date and accurate information. Because you're only managing it once, there's no more files to share out with people and to be dependent on them loading it into their system and assigning it. Every time learners are launching the course, they're coming back to that single source of truth, the content on your servers. So if you have content that is dynamic and is updated frequently, this is really, really important. So a distributed model might be the best choice for you. If you care about consistency, which who doesn't, you want to make sure that it's consistent across all of your audiences. So if you think about an extended learning network for a second, you want all of the people in that network to have the same information. And providing a single source of truth for your content ensures that your distributors, your resellers, your supply chain, they all are operating from the same playbook. Or even your internal audiences. If you have your contractors, or you've got multiple systems even within your own organization, this helps make sure that everyone is working from the same document and has the same information at the same time. Obviously, If you only have it in one place and it's always updated, that reduces a lot of administrative headaches for both you and your customers. No more swapping around files or sending out updates whenever you need to fix anything or update any content. Once you provide the proxy file or provide access to that course for your customer, that's the lift on their side. Everything else is taken care of. So we can't eliminate the work that it takes to actually update your content and create the new version or fix the typo, but the distributed model certainly can help make sure that that information is quickly and easily shared out with all of your learners. So reporting and insights, if we think back again to that visual with the courses in one place, not only is the content being served in one place, or you have a single copy of the content, you also have a single place where all of the tracking and information is being stored. So anytime learners launch your courses or content, you know about it. You're able to see as much information as that course is tracking for you. What I mean there is you might have courses that simply record a pass fail, and you're able to see that at the learner level. You can see it across anyone that's consuming that course. You can also get more detailed. There's often cases where we see people that might be using XAPI courses to get more granular level detail. You're able to get that visibility from this distributed model. So thinking about all of the valuable pieces of information or reports you might care about, the distributed model really helps protect that information and make sure that you have it all. So if you need to track compliance, which of your partners are taking your content, which of your contractors have followed the compliance policies and have completed all of the training, all of that information is visible and available to you. Things that are kind of nice to have sometimes. You've got some visibility now into how your content is being consumed across the entire network. So you can gauge pretty quickly, wow, these courses are being used most frequently. These are really popular. This is a section of our library, or these are courses we're pushing out to our partners that no one is taking. Is the content too long? Is it just not engaging? Is it not relevant? You've got some insights now to direct your instructional design teams and your content teams to say, wow, this content's really effective. People are really responding to it. Or, these are places where we could do better. So having that visibility, that qualitative insight is really important and a valuable piece of the distributed model. And another beauty of the distributed model is that the data can be available in both systems. So it's not just trapped in your system, and it's not just stuck in the third-party LMS's system. In a distributed model, it's common to see both the content provider, the system that's actually delivering the content, obviously has the reporting and the tracking information, but the third-party LMS oftentimes also has reports and visibility into that information. So win-win for both sides. You have shareable data that both you and your partner or third party can see. And finally, we started talking about access. And this is a place where we definitely see the value in a distributed model is making sure that you can protect your assets. So it's your course, it's your blood, sweat, and tears, it's your IP. If you keep it on your servers, you're doing everything you can to protect it, and that is critical in most cases. It also allows you to really control access to it. You might have the people that shape your extended learning network today might not always be the same players. So if by using a distributed model, you enable or have control over who is actually accessing that content. And again, if relationships change, whether a partner is no longer a partner, a contractor is no longer working for you, or a customer lets their product training subscription lapse, those are moments where you might want to be able to disable access to your courses. So having that power is very, very valuable in a distributed model. So let's kind of review back, thinking about what are the options as you're building out or refining how you deliver your content across multiple systems and ways you might tackle this challenge today or already doing so. If we look at each of the three models, sharing files, and again, that's handing off your courses to your customers or third parties to load into their system. Um, it does require a client LMS, so they do have to have a system in place to consume that content. It does not allow you to enable or disable access. So it's sort of an all or nothing. It's sort of a nothing proposition, really. If you think about it, you're handing your files off and hope that your relationship stays intact, that you always want them to access that content. But if something changes, there really is no way for you to retract it or take that access away. They will always have your content. Um, Accuracy. So as we talked about, once that content is out there, maintaining that content is a pretty difficult proposition. You are definitely relying heavily on your customer to upload and assign the new version if and when you share it with them. And this is also a place where if you have typos or if you have breaking changes, as we talked about, those both get equal, those both require equal work. So if you are sharing your files, just be aware that anytime you need to make a change, whether big or small, it will require work on your client side to get that new content loaded up. And it will give them visibility into the things that you're updating or changing, whether you want them to know about it or not. So that's definitely something to consider. On the reporting side, this is the one where they have the files, they have the reports, and your visibility is none. So this becomes a black box for you where once you hand that file off, there is absolutely no visibility into what learners are doing, how many people are taking your courses. So it's a pretty, if reporting is more important to your client than it is to you, this model might work best for you, but that's definitely something to consider, sort of one of the things we would say would be a watch out. And if we look at the tooling here, really, the tool that's required, authoring tool. So, I've probably scared you away a little bit at this point from the shared file model, but one of the pros here for sure is um, it's pretty easy to get up and running. So there's some great authoring tools out there that allow you to easily build content and publish it. So the path to entry here is pretty short. You can be up and running or get your content out to your customers pretty quickly. There are definitely some cons to take into account, though, if you go down that path. If we look at the direct delivery model, it's sort of the inverse of what we just looked at. So no client LMS required. You're providing that. And it gives you the ability to manage access. So that access and ability for learners to get into your system requires some administrative work on your side and likely some development work or support to make sure folks can get into the system. But it does give you complete control over who that is and the flexibility there that your client doesn't have to have an LMS to be able to participate and take your content. On the flip side, do you think about your customers that have an appetite for sending their employees to another system? So if they already have a system in place, direct delivery model here might present some challenges. But if we go down to other pros of hosting and delivering your content directly into your network or to your network of folks, it's yours. You have maintaining it is quite easy. It's on your servers. You can do with your content whatever you like whenever you want to. So you do have a lot of flexibility when it comes to maintaining that content and updating it as needed, and no one's the wiser whenever you make updates like that. Additionally, when it comes to reporting, again, you're going to have complete visibility because everything is in your world. The downside of that is if you do have customers that do want reports, you'll have to figure out a way to deliver a report. If they do have an LMS or a system that they want that report to report into,
it's not particularly easy to get data into other people's systems, reporting systems. There might be work to do there. So thinking about what your client's reporting requirements are. If they have an LMS, but you want them to come to your system, there's some complexities there. Tooling required here, I'm going to call it an LMS. It can actually just be any platform that somebody can log into and access training. So the most direct, easiest tooling out there might be an off-the-shelf LMS. Again, there's a wide variety from lightweight to more advanced feature sets. So really understanding what you require will help you determine the right LMS there. But just understand when you going down this path, you might bump into a couple of roadblocks when it comes to providing that solution to customers that might already have a learning system in place they would prefer to use. And then finally, we've got the distributed model that we've been talking about. So, this stuff, as we look at the requirements here, client LMS required, yes, there has to be a system that's available to consume those proxy files, those shareable files that we talked about. It does allow you to break that access or disable access at any time. So you do have complete control over who can take the course or launch the course, even across that vast network. Maintenance, obviously, we've just talked about that a little bit. Maintaining your courses is really easy when it's on your servers. So no additional work on your client side. Whenever you make an update, it's automatically the one that's available the next time somebody launches. And then on the reporting side, this is probably one of the more interesting, columns to look at here when we've got yes and yes. So both your client and you have visibility into what's happening with those courses. In most distributed models, you will see the proxy files are able to report back into the third-party launching LMS right into their gradebook. So it looks just like every other course that somebody might be taking. And then, of course, on your side, you have all of the visibility into what's happening in that content, from completions all the way down to question level analytics. So you've got a lot of visibility there. So this is really a win-win for both sides. Tooling required here. You're probably curious right now. So we've talked a lot about a distributed model, and it's a little bit different or new. There's a lot of cross-domain solutions that are available on the market. You might be familiar with LCMS. So LCMSs do oftentimes provide some of this functionality, or a dispatch service like SCORM Cloud Dispatch, or something that we provide called Content Controller. So there are cross-domain solutions on the market, but those would all enable you to support a distributed model to capture all of the concepts that we've just talked about. So I want to wrap things up and just kind of circle back to where we started today and provide some tools and resources for you to take away with you. So really, first and foremost, understand what your network looks like. Who are you trying to serve? What do you want them to get out of your training? What kind of information are you trying to get out there? And what systems are part of this network? So really taking that inventory is going to be critical. That will then help you discover what's the right tool for us. What's the level of investment from a time and finance standpoint? And it's not just the getting started, it's the ongoing. So if you look at the tools and the options out there, it might be faster and easier to get started, but it might present a more expensive proposition for you later as you look at the challenges that might come with ongoing needs to maintain the content and other things. So really looking at the big picture, not thinking about the short term, but trying to think about tackling your extended learning network approach really, for a long term. And none of this stuff is easy. We talk to folks every day when it comes to how to manage this, how to make sure that their content and systems play well together. So we are here to help. We do this all day long. So if you bumped into any questions today or this provided some food for thought, we would love to hear from you. And we wanted to share with you a couple of resources. So couple of things that you can take away with. There's sort of an overview of what this all looks like if you don't want to wade through a bunch of slides later. We've created a handy little guide that sort of walks you through a lot of what we talked about today. And like many, I think seeing examples, real world use cases is always helpful. So we've provided a couple of case studies of others who have followed this model, and you can see what the most important challenge was for them and how they've used this distributed model to help tackle those.
Thank you, Tammy. That was wonderful. And we will make sure to include the link for your training guide as well. So that way people can then download it easily. And then I imagine, and then there was another link that was shared as well that will get access to your use cases. I do have a quick question, just because of the way things are going now. A lot of my marketing colleagues in the past have done training in person, right? So they have this content, but they have really no way now then to share beyond what they've done in person. So just a quick, like step 1, 2, and 3, like how would that work in that world, especially now because we are unable to really do in-person trainings or workshops?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We do see this. We have this conversation a lot. So transitioning from in person to digital learning and all of the things to consider there is kind of what I heard. So one, you need to create the e-learning version of whatever your in-person courseware was. So that can be as simple as something like a webinar, like we're doing right now, that you capture as a video. It can be a 5-minute video you shoot on your phone, the level, or it can be a course that you go out and build in an authoring tool like Articulate Storyline, Adobe Captivate, Domino's Claro product. There's lots out there. So there's lots of ways to quickly create the e-learning content. So there's tools to make it easier, even if it feels a little bit daunting. The thing that we would focus on would be, more importantly, the delivery of that course. So how do you anticipate connecting your audiences to your content? And that might mean that you want to deliver it to them. So that might incorporate, okay, so now you have to have a platform of some sort. Where do they come to access that course? And we've seen everything from folks spinning up a WordPress site with simple links to content in it, to licensing an LMS, to building something custom. Or in this case, building it and then sharing it with customers that already have an LMS, or they already have a way to take training. They just need the training. So really looking at the requirements there. You might see both. I would imagine you might have 2 different customer groups, some that already have a system and some that need one. And in that case, I would definitely recommend looking at something lightweight to build, unless you're going to become unless your use case becomes very sophisticated. You might just need simple tooling to allow people to log in, maybe a shopping cart e-commerce component if you want to sell access. And again, a lot of this can be built on something like a WordPress, or you can license an LMS that already has those tools built in. But then you also want to make sure whatever you're building, whatever that course is, if you are going to share it with customers that already have an LMS, make sure that you're thinking about the standards there, or that their LMS can handle the course as you deliver it to them. So if it's a video file, make sure they can support video. Or if they're, a SCORM 1.2 only LMS, make sure you give it to them in that format. And again, those authoring tools really help you deliver that. And if we kind of go back to a lot of the things that we just talked about, you can deliver it direct. You can share it with your customers, or you can use something like, I would suggest in this case, SCORM Cloud Dispatch, which allows you to keep the course in one place and serve both of those audiences. So you're able to deliver it direct to learners in a couple of different ways through SCORM Cloud, or you can share access for your customers that have an LMS already.
Oh, thank you so much for all that information. I imagine this is, in our learning and development world, this is not new information. It's just a different way to think about it, especially the distributed model, as you mentioned. So that may be a different new way for us to think about it. But for many others outside of the learning and development space, this is new to think about to deliver training in a way that is digital or online. So thank you. This was definitely very informative. We definitely appreciate your time being here with us today. And, I know that while we are all safely at home, working from home, that doesn't make your schedule any less busy. So we definitely appreciate you taking the time out and sharing your knowledge. So I will definitely include the links for downloading the training guide from Rustici Software. Again, Tammy Rutherford with Rustici Software. Thank you for your time today. Thank you, everyone. And if you would like to connect with Tammy, we'll include the links as well to make sure that you connect and contact Rustici should you have any questions about anything that was presented in today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anne.